Salutations, everyone! Welcome back to Total War Pharaoh. I'm Lord Forward, and today I've got a guide for you guys on Irsu, the Ravager, the guy who actually kind of lives up to his title of being the stereotypical barbarian, raider, pillager, warlord. Irsu's a very fun faction. He's one of the two Canaanite ones, and in fact, he's the last faction guide I have had to do on this game. So, let's jump right into it. I'm going to timestamp various sections of the video below so you can skip to what you like. And if the video does help you, please do like, comment, subscribe, those great things. It shows great appreciation to me and I really do like it. So, let's get going. So, Irsu has, I think, the most strengths and weaknesses of almost any faction. Yes, he's good at some things, but he's also very bad at others. So he has several buildings. We'll go over buildings in more detail later. But the things to realize is he can't upgrade resource buildings. And that is his biggest, arguably one of his biggest penalties. He's got several. Your base level buildings here, like a livestock pasture, give good food income, but you can't improve them. This does prevent you from playing tall and building up. You really do need to conquer. It's about 1.5 settlements to equal one of another faction settlements for Irsu. So you really do need to be expanding. You're not going to get as much resources out of what land you hold, meaning you need to hold more land, basically. Can be overcome if you take the trading legacy from the Egyptians, but overall, it's not worth it. You have these compounds which give you production but cost you happiness. Happiness problems are pretty much the name of the game for Irsu, and we'll talk more about those when we do buildings. Onto his faction units. He's got great military units. He has some of the best. He's probably one of the top 3 factions in terms of the combat. Yes, he has expensive units. They're slow, they're vulnerable to terrain, but they're strong. And more importantly, a lot of them come with axes, which means they devastate shield units. It is a very strong combo. These Sabu Negibs, backbone of their army, they have lots of weapon variations. They're strong. They do charge sometimes without your command stuff, which can be a pain. But by and large, they're going to defeat most units mid. Start moving into late game. Once you hit the late game, these Henku warriors, amazing axemen. They are really strong. They have some of the highest damage in the game. They devastate shields, and they're well armored. Do cost bronze, food, and gold to maintain. They're worth it, though. They are slightly vulnerable to missiles. Thankfully, they have a lot of armor, but armor-piercing missile units can cause them some trouble, especially because they're slow, meaning they can't necessarily catch up to skirmishers. So just be aware of that. If you're countering them, armor-piercing skirmishers is the way to go. Now, Irsu has one of the most unique commands. It's kind of ironic that both Canaanite factions have some of the most interesting commands. As Irsu, you can lower the civilization state by hitting your command button once a Shemsu Hor. This sounds good because Irsu does get the benefits of the nomadic people when he lowers the civilization state. However, there are some downsides to this, and this is the biggest mistake I see people when they play this faction, and it was a mistake I made on my first playthrough with Irsu. You think, great, I get the benefits of the nomadic ones, they're good. You get it for that Shemsu Hor cycle. Not all future ones, which is a problem. Meaning, once that cycle of Shemsu Hor is over, you start to receive all the penalties of the civilized nations, like -10 replenishment from going into crisis, bigger problems once you fall into collapse, meaning even though you can accelerate the collapse of the world and make the nomadic people and the sea people stronger, it does come with the downside of, in the long term, unless you're constantly hitting that command button, it weakens you as well. Now, thankfully, you don't have as big of a penalty on the turn you hit it, but you have to keep hitting it. One interesting trick with this is if you wait till the last turn of Shemsu Hor and activate it, you get the benefits. You decrease the civilization state without losing the biggest penalty of this, which is, and I didn't go over this, you cannot occupy settlements when you hit the command button in that Shemsu Hor cycle. If you wait till the last turn and hit it, you can occupy on all the preceding turns, which is the trick if you want to use it that way. Now, if you don't use it, you get more income from raiding stance and sacking. Honestly, my first playthrough, I hit it so much, it basically collapsed the world by the Shemsu horse cycle, I think 5 or 6. So turn 42, 45. The problem is the penalties I had made it really hard for me to expand and fight off the sea and nomadic people as well, unless I kept hitting the command. So at some point, once you conquer lands, you kind of want to restabilize it. If you constantly have to keep hitting that command button, the world will never be stable. So it's a double-edged sword. The reality is waiting till the raiding stance and sacking is probably better most of the times, because Irsu gets benefits to both raiding and sacking anyhow. Now, in terms of the court, Irsu has arguably the most painful court life. He cannot use gossip, encourage, or discourage. Basically, he can't really gain regard or support or decrease support for plots. You still have some access to some of the other intrigues, like discredit and some stuff, but you can't gain regard easily on your own. Yes, sometimes you will manage to trade, and if there's an option to cancel the plot to gain regard, you usually want to take it because you have no easy way to gain it. However, every Shemsu Hort you receive regard with a random court position. I'm pretty sure it's just enough that you can get a request, and that's about it. And you want to be using those requests, or you want to be trying to gain legitimacy. But the reality is you have a painful court life. You're not going to gain as much legitimacy through plotting and intrigue. You're going to have to conquer or build your way to legitimacy. And for Irsu, conquering is a much easier way of doing it than building because of his strength at combat and his lack of resource buildings. It does suggest that you take the Egyptian first commander or the Hittite high commander positions. Yes, I have no issue with that. We'll talk about court later, but overall, that's a decent idea. In terms of other stuff, you worship Moloch. For those of you who study the history and some of the Old Testament and stuff of the Bible, you will start to recognize some of these names. It's important to realize the Canaanites are not Israeli, Jewish. They are the people the Jews fought against, and they're also inaccurately named because the Egyptians and Hittites just named everybody in that area of the Middle East Canaanites. So we don't really know all the details. Suffice to say, though, Moloch is probably, I think, one of the worst gods to start with for Irsu. It does give you increased unit defense and workforce, which helps you build up decently well. And if you pray, you massively increase morale, and devoting a general to it, which you should dedicate Irsu to early on, gives your army more melee attack and damage, which is great for a warmonger like Irsu. The downside is you have no influence generation, and you really have no happiness, and you desperately need happiness. This guy struggles with happiness arguably the most of any faction. So it's good and bad. You want to get another god, arguably the Egyptian Ptah or the Hittite one that also gives happiness as well. So that is actually one of your first goals, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Irsu's titles are reducing happiness in exchange for bonuses, which is nice. Armies causing fear is always good, and winning battles also very useful. Talk about that a bit later if I remember. In terms of your legacy, you get to pick if you want to go Egyptian or you want to go Hittite. Egyptian is better. That's the reality. You've got 4 options. They're probably better than the Hittites. The Hittite one, making your generals administer vassals. It's a cool concept, but you really want to be conquering things. And the other Hittite option, which is basically having happy vassals, not something Irsu excels in, keeping your own people happy. And in terms of vassals, you just want to take it yourself. So we'll talk about Egyptian legacies later, but you want to go Egyptian. The downside is you have no sacred lands. To join one of the 2 royal traditions, you have to pay 1,000 gold, which you're not going to have for a long time usually. Meaning you need to conquer land a sacred land of that, which usually is about 2nd to 3rd Shemsu Hor cycle, depending on how fast you grow. And the odds are if you go south, you're going to get Egyptian slower than if you go north and get the Hittite one. Going north into the Hittite lands is actually harder for Irsu, which is interesting. Anyway, let's move on and go over strengths and weaknesses. Okay, starting position. So the first thing you want to do is probably hit the home button on your keyboard to realign the map to its normal configuration rather than, as usual, the very odd starting map. So you will see Irsu starts east of Damascus, which is interesting. And he starts with the province of Tadmor, and unlike most, he starts with his army right next to an enemy settlement, meaning your first move should be to conquer it after you do something. You're going to want to go in and assign him Prudent in Victory first, which gives increased ancillary chant and battle loot. The reason is you probably will get an ancillary out of the battle, and if not, and you do loot, you will get some more resources out of it, which is always a good thing. Take Sedad, then build up. You're going to want to move to the border right about here on the next turn, so turn 2. Recruit your first turn. In terms of what units to recruit, let's just quick win this battle so I can show you. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So in terms of Irsu, you're going to want to up his replenishment because you're going to want to be fighting. So basically put most of his starting points into replenishment. In terms of units to recruit, you start off with some decent units. You start off with access to the Habiru Raiders, which are really good against shields. If you can afford them, which at the start is a little bit tough, they are the superior unit to recruit. These rest ones are all level 1. However, the Habiru Militia is probably what you're going to build early on. I would throw down 2 Habiru Raiders at the first, and then afterwards use Militia and maybe 1 or 2 archers. So something like that. But you want to be invading the enemy land by the time you've recruited both of those units. So recruit, move to the border, recruit again. Now, it's also worth mentioning if you pray at the Shrine of Moloch, you will get a benefit as well, which is worth doing on your way through. Build up your troops, take a second turn. So first turn, conquer, build up. Second turn, move, pray, build up. Invade Damascus immediately afterwards on turn 3. Fairly easy to take Damascus. In my experience, they actually attack you, meaning you win the turn you start the siege. Build a ladder, build a siege battering ram in case you want to fight the battle yourself. That's usually the best combo. Once you take Damascus, if you take it on the turn processing, meaning they attack you and you win the battle, the next turn march south as far as you can to the border with this province. Build up again, probably building the archers at that point, invade and take Jawa, and by turn, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you should control the whole region and be able to start moving on. Now, in terms of what you build, Irsu has problems with stone. There are no easy access to stone mines here. If you go north, you get stone. Otherwise, you're going to need to conquer south and take, I forget the name of it. It's something starting with an S. To get your stone, and you're going to want to do that afterwards. So basically your first turn of building is all you're going to manage to build for 7 to 10 turns. So picking your build is important. I recommend throwing down a wheat field for the food, because food is what you're lacking, and upgrading Sedad here. The reason is you want to get access to the pig farm with more food. Your other settlement here is already generating a large amount of food due to your livestock pasture and forced labor compound. The downside is you're having some happiness problems. There's not a lot you can do about that at the moment. What you can do, in addition, if you want, is throw down a trading post in both settlements. It does use up a lot of your stone. The reason throwing it down isn't bad is it will boost the food you get. You can also, if you want, throw down another shrine, so you're getting more melee defense on your units that you're going to be recruiting the first couple turns. Be aware, though, if you throw it down, you're going to be using up most of your stone. Especially if you do another upgrade or build something in Damascus. We're already down to 270. We won't be getting more. Once you've taken Jawa, you've got to decide. Are you going north to become Hittite, or are you going south to become Egyptian? Regardless, I recommend you go south and you conquer this region right here. Reason is it gives you some stone, which really does help you. And it's not particularly hard to conquer. I did it in, I think, 4 turns. Basically, marching on one turn, take a settlement. March on the next turn, take another settlement. March over to the other settlement, siege it, or fight the army in the field. In my experience, they tend to have an army recruiting in the field, so you fight that, defeat their army in their garrison in the settlement. Next turn, siege the settlement. Turn after, take it. So for the 10 turns, you should own 8 settlements, basically. That gives you access to stone and a good border region. At that point, you can go further south, conquering this area here, or you can turn your eyes and go north. Around the time you take Damascus, Bay, the other playable Canaanite faction, will take his province to complete his 3 at his main settlement. He still won't own the capital. It's worth making a non-aggression pact with him and military access. He's probably going to be the only faction that will ever ally you for most of the game, in which case he can prove to be a decent ally. He tends to compete with you a little bit. He's not particularly expansionistic, which is good. Considering he doesn't have a capital settlement, he can't grow too strong unless you let him get one. But you could also just merely march it and conquer his lands, which gets you a stone mine, 2 food provinces, and eliminates your only rival in the entire area. Basically, this becomes your playground, and you can easily consolidate it all before marching into Anatolia or Egypt. That's an option. If you go north up here, taking this settlement, Teshub, is very important because it gives you stone. Qatna here is in ruins. In my experience, it tends to be colonized by this faction pretty early on. Taking Imar, the capital, actually is a bit of a pain in my experience. You need basically to ambush his army, but they don't march to take Teshub in my experience. They tend to go around it here, especially if you take Qana. They colonize Qana. They tend to come out here and cause problems. An alternate strategy, if you could pull it off, would be to... Sorry, I've played this guy several campaigns. Would be to raise an army here, basically on turn 1, send him north, and hope to get Qatna before this guy does. If you do, that does give you a better starting way to invade him. Just be aware, the AI seems to prioritize this settlement and invading through here more than actually beating you, meaning ambushing him can get tricky. Once you take his capital, he does fall pretty easily, and then you can push further north. You're looking... Well, it doesn't show it. You're looking to get up here if you want to join the Hittites, meaning even if you take this area, you've got 2 more regions to go before you can join the Hittites. If you're going Egyptian, you have to get down to here. This is the first Egyptian sacred province you'll probably take. I'll show you that more when we jump forward in time. Okay. Royal decrees. Irsu has a slightly different path than most factions. So, if you see my other guides, you kind of roughly know the pattern, so you may not want to watch too much, so I'll tell you the unique thing. You want to get this god dedication slot really early as Irsu. You need a god that gives happiness, basically. It solves 80% of your campaign problems and will make your life a lot simpler. However, you don't necessarily want to rush that, except that you kind of do. You probably want to start with longer festivals. The reality is getting +3 happiness. That's the easiest way to keep your capital region happy and not revolting. Plus, it allows you to throw down another one of Irsu's +50 production buildings, which is great. Grab food. Now you've got the choice. Get relations. You're probably not going to have stone, so don't grab that. Or get wood, followed by the god. I would recommend getting the additional wood because the Canaanite area tends to have lots of wood that you can trade for the resources you need. Plus the god dedication slot. Once you get down towards the Egyptian lands or the Hittite, you'll have discovered a god that gives you happiness. And that makes your life a lot easier. Throw 1 or 2 of them down in basically every settlement through the outpost system. Don't build them in the actual cities. Unless you're going for favor, it's not worth it. And then you can put down even more of Irsu's production buildings. And the reality is your settlements will become as productive as upgraded other factions. Now, once you've done that, you may want to snag bronze if you found a bronze production building. But the reality is you're probably going to want to go on a charm offensive, get relations, get more food during the collapse, which if you're hitting your lower civilization button, if you're going that play style, the plus additional food income is really nice. Afterwards, you probably want to do Comfort in the Familiar, get relations with Bay mainly. All the other Canaanites you probably are going to want to conquer at some point. This just prevents them from attacking you. The reality, though, the AI at the moment is not aggressive, so I've rarely been attacked. Snagging, if you're going south to Egypt, knowledge of the proud, better relations with the Egyptians. If you're going north, humble and ethical for the Hittites. Now, some other points to mention. You will get a gold mine early on, so it is worth snagging Gift of the Gods when you can get it. If you want, farming the forests will get you a little bit more food. Don't focus this if you're hitting the collapse button all the time. Snagging the Canaanite Perseverance here, one of the starting 3, is decent. You'll get more ancillaries. I find I have too many of them, especially if you go Hatshepsut trading history as Egypt. Or you do the Hittite one, which you can just gain equipment. Moving on from there, you've got a couple different options. Over here, if you ally an Egyptian faction, as in you're probably invading the Canaanites, plus 15 food is really useful, but otherwise, forget this area pretty much exists. This one, though, influence for provinces with monument, faction-wide, very good. Your Canaanite, you're actually, let's see, what's the culture called? It's a strange culture name here. It's Ret Janu Warlords, I believe, is your culture called, which is kind of interesting. Meaning, basically, almost nowhere else other than your starting region is going to have your culture, meaning you need a lot of influence to get production out of your lands. And since you struggle with upgrading production buildings anyway, having additional influence is really helpful. You have to build a monument, 200 stone. You're going to want to build it anyway, especially if you want to become Hittite or Pharaoh, Hittite Great King or Pharaoh. This will help control those areas. Plus 5 influence is top tier influence generation. And for 200 stone, it's easily worth it. Now, afterwards, Irsu is a lot about combat, so you probably are going to end up getting another god dedication slot. It's your choice. This is easier to get to, and it gives you access to some better stuff. You could also go this way. If you get an alliance, the only one you really ally is going to be Bay for a lot of the game. Another god, which could be nice. You can kind of round out what you're missing, because you'll have combat. You'll probably take happiness as your first, which I would recommend. So your third could be influence. Stacking with this, you should have no influence problems. Then you get the reduced upkeep. Irsu should be building tier 3 units fairly early on, because you're so warmongery getting to higher units. Plus you have access to copper reasonably quickly, meaning you can afford some of this. Gold, you also have gold. So you can afford top tier units much sooner than most factions, which the decreased upkeep is really useful. Additional stone is good up here. More generation of XP is nice, because if you get to the end here and you get rank 9 infantry, plus 10 melee attack is amazing, especially on some of your elite axemen, because it also gives resistance to missiles, which, since they don't have shields, drastically increases their survivability. Other thing to mention is, if you want to not necessarily fight battles as much, training mandate, chariot stuff, useless. But once you get down here, raiding income up. Irsu's good at raiding. This helps. Also allows you to take settlements without having to necessarily fight the battles. Although the AI tends to attack the turn just as they're losing, which is good. Legitimacy for defensive and military alliance. A lovely boost to legitimacy. You're probably not going to have too many defensive or military alliances. Bay is going to be your most likely one. If you want to leave them alive, you might get a minor Canaanite 1 or 2. Most major settlements are going to be more afraid of you than anything else. Power of the people, income sources from provinces with max idle workforce is invaluable for Irsu. Since Irsu can't develop his settlements as much as others, you're going to hit max idle workforce probably sooner than most other factions. And since you lack production, plus 20 income is really nice as well. The only downside is you're going to have happiness problems. But if you go the god dedication route I mentioned, we'll solve that pretty much for the rest of the game. And over here, the higher recruitment ranks for high level units, very useful late game, as well as gold among the bronze, ancillary chance, and construction time for military outposts. Some of Irsu's units are expensive, so do be aware and remember that building forts does decrease the upkeep by 50%. This is how Irsu should be dealing with some of the nomadic people and the sea people if they ever get to your lands. Unless you go to the coast, your inner settlements are pretty safe. I had just one army running around killing them, but having additional benefits to looting and combat, as well as constructing forts and watchtowers, was quite useful as the game progressed. It really is. Irsu expands so rapidly. Surprisingly, a large amount of his game is building up his settlements. You definitely need stone, though, for that. So let's jump forward in time, and we'll look at one of my campaigns, and I'll show you some of the stuff that's been going on as Irsu progresses, more buildings, and we'll go over Legacy and Court after that. Okay, here we are, turn 27. As I said, Irsu expands rapidly. We control our starting area, we control another region, we control a third region, we're marching on a fourth. So we are at the point we can pick a legacy, but let's go over buildings and stuff first. So as you can see now, we've just snuck down here to take Azati. If you move rapidly enough, like I did, Ramses will not have taken it, meaning you can easily snag it. Otherwise, I'd have to wait 2 turns to get enough gold to join the Hittites or whatever. As I said, you still want to invade Sechem down here for the stone, bronze, and wood, which your starting area really lacks. Once you have that, you have all the resources. Hell down here, this area, Ashkelon, is reasonably easy to take. You take Pal, you probably have to ambush an army that's invading from Jerusalem. Take that out, take Jerusalem. Ashkelon, however, is probably going to be one of your biggest threats. When I got to it, it was a settlement. 4 city with a large army. It was able to support 31 units plus the garrison in that area. Ambushing was key. I set up an ambush here, got their big 20 army, tried to march in, found their army was still too strong, set up another ambush, wiped out their 13 army, then finally took their settlement. Surprisingly, the hardest part, the rest of these fell really rapidly to Irsu. Also, interesting little landmark there, the gorge. Kind of cool from the Dead Sea stuff. Once you've taken this, obviously you could go south into Beersheba, or you could attempt to take on Ramesses. Right now, at my part of the game, moving forward, I invaded Ramesses and I wiped him out by, I think, turn 35 at the latest. And that meant the rest of the Sinai and this whole region was mine to dominate. The other option, rather than going as far south as I did, which I did after I took out Ramesses, was come back and take out Megiddo here for additional gold and food and just general consolidation. Plus, it prevented Bay from expanding. I don't think Bay got out of this area for like 80% of the game. I think he took a province on Cyprus, and that was it. Now, going north, I didn't go north, but it's just as easy for Irsu. My starting army, as you can see, I didn't even go the Hibiru Raiders at the start. I've only added them in now. We have an excess of every resource in the game. We're massive. His army is very powerful, as you can see. We're dedicated to Moloch. It did not go in this campaign the royal decrees for the god dedication slot, and I probably should have. You will also see, if we look here, I did hit the collapse button, and now you can see we have a morale penalty and replenishment. If we hit this button again, you will see, here we go, we lose those penalties, we get melee attack, charge bonus, and morale, but we can't occupy. Basically, we steal the bonuses here, but you keep having to keep hitting it over and over again to maintain that. Let the world burn. And it's a huge boost, though. I mean, these guys start to become monstrous. I mean, look at that. 38 defense, 42 attack, 57 damage. It's going to wreck most basic units. And that is only I think it's only a tier 2 unit. Irsu gets better ones later on. It's on par with some of the Egyptians' mid-tier units. So, let's talk about court. So we have joined the Egyptian court. We don't own any lands. Obviously, Irsu struggles because while you can do stuff like this blackmail and other stuff, which is good, performing intrigue, you can't do that. So basically, if you plot, your plots only have the base success chance, meaning if you're going to scheme, you got to find people you can scheme against. Even this guy here only has a 50% chance of succeeding. It gets worse as they get more legitimacy. So plotting against these high level ones, 22% chance of succeeding. It's very hard to gain legitimacy there. But getting the elite units, flanking maneuvers, lower unit costs, first commander, really good. Viceroy of Kush, if you want Kushite units to have some archers and stuff, because Kushites are decently good archers, can be worth doing. Gold isn't worth it though. The Vizier, the extra scheme, you don't really need it, although the Assassinate can be fun. High Priest of Amun, honestly, don't really bother unless you're worried about shrine costs. Treasurer, cool because you get access to Embezzle, which can be nice, and that will give you some legitimacy and you get extra gold. Kind of cool. The rest of the stuff, relatively useless for you though. Arguably, court, not great for Irsu. In terms of legacies though, obviously we're going Egyptian on this one. We have options. Now, the merchant one will get you the resources you need. You have enough resources. You don't really need it as Irsu. Now, it does give you more income. And since Irsu has lower production than some other factions, can be a problem. If you play right, though, he has more production. So, that's a thing. Utmost the Conqueror helps you take cities. The reality is Irsu doesn't need this legacy. It's strong, but you can usually win a one-on-one battle. Sometimes even one on a full enemy army plus a garrison. Really good. Akhenaten, though, is worth considering because it basically allows you to combine two gods. And if you haven't hit the god dedication or you just want to make it stronger, you can combine happiness, influence, and military to make it strong, or happiness and 2 military to make your armies ridiculous. Plus, you get access to the city of Akhenaten, which is an empty settlement in Egypt that you're probably going to be the only one to colonize, which allows you to set up a colony in Egypt early. Khufu the Builder, though, I would honestly ignore it as Irsu. Building is not what Irsu does if you're role-playing it, and the other reality is most of the monuments are located in central or lower Egypt, and you just want to be conquering things. So Thutmose or Akhenaten would be my recommendations. You could make an argument for the merchant. Really, the builder, though, isn't worth going for. That basically requires you to want to make your civilization stable and have lots of resources. Not something Irsu's really good with. However, I'm going to start Akhenaten here so we can just look at it. So we can pick 2 gods. We want to keep Moloch because of the devoted general bonuses. Outside of that, if you want replenishment, Baal is really good. Combining these 2, massive melee defense increase, massive replenishment, plus your prayers make your armies almost unstoppable. If you're conquering the world and you want to do a world conquest, that's probably the god combination you want to start with. You will eventually add another god, I believe, in which case you might want to pick another one. If you're struggling with happiness, though, Ta, really good for happiness. In fact, at this point, it's the only one we... Oh, wait, we could do Asherah. Asherah's pretty good. For influence, her shrines provide happiness. You could make an argument for it. I would rather recommend you take Ta because it reduces recruitment costs, gives you additional food, and happiness. The downside is you lose gold during collapse. For shrines, 10, your average mine can support 5 or 6 of them, plus the reduced upkeep and charge bonus, and your prayer boosts resources from raiding, something that Irsu does really well with. So combining these 2, that would be the strength we're looking at to start. It's pretty good. And then as we improve it, it would get better. So we just have to dedicate Irsu to that god, which we have to reach tier 2, meaning you have to start converting, I think it automatically converts yours. You have to build some more shrines. But the reality is, since the shrines are now providing happiness, you're going to want to build them most everywhere. And the reason I talked about that before we talked about buildings is because this drastically shapes how you manage your settlements. So moving on to buildings. We've got the happiness from going Aten or getting a god that provides happiness. The reason that this matters, you also have to destroy that building though. The reason that this matters is because of Irsu's unique buildings. So it's easier to look at it here. We've already talked about resource. The big one here for Irsu is forced labor compounds. For the cost of 3 happiness in the province, all regions in the settlement get plus 50% production, as well as workforce growth and food income. It's really good. Can be actually worth building several of them. Now, the point to realize is that production region building is the region, not the province of multiple regions, the singular region. Meaning, wherever you build it, it's only going to improve that settlement's production. It will give more food income as well as workforce growth, but the happiness also applies province-wide. So basically, you're making one settlement, your whole province unhappy to boost the production in one settlement. And 3 happiness is fairly large. Now, the starting royal decree here plus 3 happiness means your starting area should be happy. You actually start with a forced labor compound, so that kind of counteracts that. It's why you usually want to start with it. Later on, though, happiness can be a problem. Obviously, not a huge issue for us in our capital. If we look south to here, happiness is slightly more of a problem. Now that we've got shrines, it stops being a problem. If you don't go a happiness god, you have to build storyteller circles and wine halls virtually everywhere. If you go a happiness god early or go Aten, you don't need these. In fact, I could probably almost get rid of them. You're still going to want to build these forced labor compounds wherever you can, but the outposts now for the gods is plus 5 happiness. We build 2 of them, so 10 happiness. We can throw down 3 production buildings, boosting what is, according to the game, very low production buildings, which ironically you can upgrade the bronze working complex. That bronze is the only one you can upgrade fully. That boosts this by 50%, so 65. Still not amazing, but it's decent. Food income, 50%, about 90 or so more. That would be 280 or so. That is on par with other settlements' food production buildings. I don't think we can see anyone else's, though. Oh, we can see Sukkot here. 250 for the port. So it's about on par with a Egyptian port. I think that's a level 3 fort, 3 port. So just thinking about that. Nope, that is a level 3 upgraded port. So it's on par with fishing grounds, which are one of the best food income buildings in the game. So Irsu can match the other factions. It just requires happiness. The way to get around it is the gods. Now, in terms of his other buildings, they are strong as well. He has these war camps, which are recruitment slots, which is great. Recruitment rank, which is even better. But the big thing is the stacking battle loot rating income. It is faction-wide, meaning it's not just in the region, unlike some others, meaning you can build several of these and get some very large advantages. The recruitment rank, recruitment slot is great, especially if you make 1 or 2 regions your army production regions. You're going to probably want to stick those more towards the coast so that you can recruit armies to deal with any sea people or invading factions, as well as the fact that you move much faster by sea than you do by land. Meaning building the armies, put them in the ocean, sail them to where you need rather than marching is great. The final building here is the gold tally quarters. You can only build it once, which kind of sucks. Okay? You can build it early on. You don't want to build it early on. It gives 2 happiness, 2 legitimacy, 5 happiness, 5 influence. The big one is the production for all resources plus 30. You want to park that in a 4-province region that provides resources you need a lot of. Your capital, if you plug it in your capital, stick it in Damascus, which is where a lot of people do, I imagine, you're going to, yes, get tons of food to the point you can support a second, maybe even third army, and a decent amount of gold. But you don't have bronze, you don't have stone. Now, you could throw it down here. This is a 3-province region. It does give you a lot of the higher level resources you might want more of, but there might be better settlements further on to do it. Throwing it down in Ramses' capital gives you 3 food productions and a bronze, which is arguably better than 3 food and gold. Basically, you want to stick it in a huge production region with lots of resources that you think you're going to need for the rest of the game. You don't want to stick it in a 2 region because it only applies to that area. So overall, plus 80 production between the production building and that in the region. Very strong, very powerful. Other things to realize, you have these pig farms, which you can build in the food areas, basically. It's basically a secondary food building. You get a wheat field, which is good growth and good production. But the pig farms and more happiness, you can get away without doing the god happiness if you want. It makes life easier, so please do it. But this does help. Food income, happiness. Ironically, your arid areas of Damascus, which if you look at it as a lot of desert arid ground, is actually as fertile and produces as much food as the Nile regions, which I think is going to require a balancing patch, nerfing the food income from this region. If it does, the strategy of boosting the production through Irsu's buildings is going to be even more important. Another quick strategy to remember is that on the coast here, let's see if I can pull this up. Oh, it's not going to actually. You have access to the smugglers' markets, which if you're collapsing the world, smugglers' markets are amazing. And you're going to want to take the coastline, take out Bay, take his settlements, throw down more smugglers' markets. You will have more food than you know what to do with. You'll be able to support lots of armies. Cheap armies, but remember your gods make them that much stronger, especially if you go Aten. Overall, this is one of the powerhouse production areas of the game in terms of resources, which is weird and I don't understand it, but very powerful. Aten solves your happiness and other balances. It allows you to build more production buildings. Otherwise, you're going to want to throw down lots of happiness, lots of the production buildings as well. You're not going to need to throw down any of these buildings in your capital area, especially if you get a good happiness god. So these are going to be more used for improving relations when you invade Egypt or hit Anatolia. The influence stuff, worth remembering, you can get a lot from royal traditions, tech if you go that way, but otherwise you're going to want to build public squares for the happiness and influence. That way you keep your influence high and you actually get resources from the settlement, but is very powerful, Irsu. Easily one of the best conquerors in the game. So I recommend going south and going Egyptian. You pretty well trounce the Egyptians with your axemen. Hittites, slightly harder because they have more armor and are more defensive, but you can easily overrun modern day Syria area and this whole area, the near Levant area. Anyway, that will be it for this guide. Actually, no, sorry, I take that back. It's not the end for the guide. I need to correct this. We didn't look at titles on Irsu. So Irsu gets some traits. If you do this, you can gain bonuses towards conquering. If you raid and sack, more resources from sacking or construction. He's predisposed to sacking. Low happiness will give you influence, which really does help with this conquering. You can also get chance of ancillaries, or if you're lucky and get this, movement restored after prayer can rapidly allow you to race around the map. His titles here, we've already talked about starting with this title, but let's glance at some of the other ones. So, hit them hard. Improves his bodyguards, which is great, because Irsu is a good fighter. He starts with good stuff. If you're going to do fighting, though, I would recommend you swap to an axe as soon as you get one rather than a spear, just because axes are better in melee combat usually. Don't stick him on chariots. It's really not worth it. It's really just not worth it. So his other stuff here, we already went over that one. Battle loot plus 100%, -4 happiness. If you're fighting lots of battles, not necessarily conquering cities, plus 100 battle loot combines with a lot of his other stuff will get you massive amounts of resources. Sometimes I think I got 6,000 food from a battle. It was amazing. Further on, catch your breath can be worth getting, especially if battles are going a while. Keeping your troops with good stamina really does help their combat stats, which get worse as the battle goes on. The reality is, though, you should be in melee combat all the time, so less useful unless you're fighting, then disengaging, then fighting again. Reality, Total War battles are just fight to the death, usually. Over here, Clenched Fist, enemy can't retreat if attacked. You can't retreat if you're attacked. If you play with ambushes and you play smart, the retreating is not an issue. Enemy cannot retreat an attack really does help you wipe out armies rather than beating them running away, you having to chase them type stuff, which can be an absolute pain. Further on, plus movement, land and sea. Don't take this one. The negative replenishment as the world falls into crisis, replenishment is more valuable. This makes it a lot harder. Fearsome in battle for his bodyguards causes dread, reducing morale. This is what makes some of Irsu's units monstrously strong. This is his bodyguards. You will get a lot of routes from this alone. No penalty from raiding. Cheaper to adopt a raiding stance. Great if you're going to go the raiding route. You can probably also just conquer the land, but you could theoretically play a very defensive game where you do lots of raiding, build tall, and then expand. Irsu can't really build tall though, so your call. Over here, make your chariots do more damage. Irsu doesn't have the greatest chariots. I really think chariots need to be reworked, in which case this would become more useful, but not affected by charge or defense, reflect, and charge bonus duration is doubled. Makes his chariots almost viably good in terms of if you charge them in, they tend to kill things. Over here, reduced upkeep, happiness, if you can get it, 4 in each column, is great. Irsu, though, doesn't struggle maintaining armies, though. Over here, building damage while looting, sacking, resources from raising. If you need resources and you want to play the stereotypical barbarian raising the world, this is amazing. Allow you to upkeep armies for several turns. Unrelenting strides, movement, army units start fresh, amazing. This is one of the best, I think, titles in the game. Allows you to rocket around the map at high speed. Remember though, to stop at outposts to restore movement range. Further on, Swooping Hawk. This is basically the Ramses command button. You can start battles in march stance. If you're going to take this though, please make sure you take Unrelenting Strides so that units start fresh. Otherwise, they're going to start winded in the battles, even though you can start the battles on march. Combining these two, Irsu becomes a rapid moving. You'll think he has trucks or something. He races in, does tons of damage, and moves on. Really powerful. Causes fear for tier units, reduces enemy morale. Amazing at getting routes. Once you hit your tier 5 axemen, you just route and slaughter everything. It's almost comedic how much morale you remove, especially from low tier units. Sometimes they even route without really much of a fight. And his last one here, rules with blood, kill captives, influence in provinces, reduced happiness. If you build lots of happiness shrines, you could use it, but really, there's better ones to take than this one. And that's the titles for Irsu. That's his traits. That's the guide. Thank you guys all for watching. If it helped you, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another guide or let's play. Bye for now.